Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. This is day 145 since Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in Tucson, Arizona. And right now, we are facing an update that has truly shifted everything we thought we knew about this case. A letter from the person who took her says that Nancy has passed away and that she is buried with nature now. NBC News, CBS News, and News Nation have all confirmed these details just in the past few days, and the news has left so many of us feeling heavy-hearted. We are going to walk through this together, step by step. We will look at the timeline of those two letters, really examine the words and the behavior behind them, hear from Savannah and the family, and talk about the latest search efforts down in Mexico. This feels like one of the most important and difficult updates we have received so far. I know many of you have been following Nancy's story with heavy hearts, and I appreciate you staying with me as we try to make sense of it all. If you are watching right now and you happen to have any information, especially anything from the Tucson area or anywhere near the Arizona-Mexico border, please consider leaving a respectful comment below. Even the smallest detail might help. And if this video helps you understand what is happening, I would be so grateful if you liked it so we can keep bringing you these updates.
Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old, a gentlewoman who lived a quiet, peaceful life in Catalina foothills, just outside Tucson. She was the beloved mother of Savannah Guthrie, who so many of us know from the Today Show. Nancy enjoyed the simple things. She was active in her church, loved spending time in her community, and had made her home in that beautiful desert landscape for many years. She was the kind of person who showed up for others, the kind of mother and grandmother who held her family together with love and quiet strength. On the morning of February 1st, 2026, everything changed. Nancy did not arrive at church as she always did. She had left without her phone and without her medications. That was so out of character that her family knew immediately something was terribly wrong. When they went to her house, the signs of a struggle were heartbreakingly clear. There was blood. The light on the back porch was broken. Her Apple Watch with the white band lay on the bedroom floor. A doorbell camera had caught a glimpse of someone wearing a mask and gloves. This was not a simple missing person case. This was a kidnapping, and it shook everyone who knew and loved her.
The family responded with incredible courage. They offered a reward that has now grown to $1 million, and the FBI stepped in to help. For weeks, people across the country prayed, shared information, and hoped against hope that Nancy would come home safely. Then the letters started arriving, and the pain took on a whole new depth. The first letter came on February 2nd, just one day after Nancy disappeared. It was sent to local news stations KOLD-TV and KGU-TV, and also to TMZ. The writer demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin. What made that letter so chilling was how specific it was. It mentioned the Apple Watch on the floor, the broken porch light, and even the clothes Nancy had been wearing that night. Those kinds of intimate details could only come from someone who had been inside her home. In that first letter, the writer said Nancy was scared but okay. The tone was cold and businesslike, all about the money and the threat of what would happen if it was not paid. Then, just 5 days later, on February 6th, the second letter arrived, and it changed everything. This letter said that Nancy had died and that her death was not intentional. The line that has stayed with so many of us is, "Buried with nature now." There was no real apology for taking her and no offer to help bring her home. Just those haunting words.
Law enforcement has confirmed that both letters were sent through the same type of secure server, even though the IP addresses were different. That connection is important. NBC, CBS, CNN, and News Nation have reported, based on sources close to the investigation, that these letters are believed to be real communications from the person responsible. Let's talk about the language in those letters, because the words reveal so much. The first letter feels direct, almost transactional. It uses very specific facts to show control. But the second letter is different. The tone shifts.
It moves from demands to something that sounds more like explanation, even justification. The words feel distant, almost poetic in a strange, unsettling way. That phrase, "buried with nature now," stands out so strongly. It is not the blunt, harsh language we usually hear in these situations. It almost sounds like the writer is trying to make the reality softer, as if Nancy has simply been returned to the desert, to the earth and sky. Forensic linguistics experts often see this kind of language when someone is struggling with guilt and trying to emotionally distance themselves from what they have done. The words "not intentional" are also very telling. It feels like the writer is acknowledging the death, but wants us to know it was not planned, not deliberate. It is a way of reducing their own responsibility. When you place the two letters side by side, you can feel how much the situation changed in just a few short days. The confidence of the first letter gives way to something more defensive in the second. It suggests the plan fell apart quickly, and the writer was left trying to explain what went wrong. The authorities held back the full details of that second letter for nearly 4 months. They were worried that if people thought the case was over, the tips would dry up. Now they have released more information, hoping it will bring forward new leads, and already thousands of calls have come in. I would love to hear what you think. What does "buried with nature now" mean to you? Does it feel like a clue about location, or does it say something about the person who wrote it? Please share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. So many good leads in cases like this come from people like you who care enough to pay attention. When we look at this through the lens of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, several things become clearer. Nancy was what they would call a low-risk victim, an older woman living a quiet life on her own. But because of her daughter's public position, she became a high-reward target for someone who wanted money and attention. The first letter shows planning. Gloves, mask, and those very specific details suggest the person had watched the house and prepared. But the quick arrival of the second letter tells us the plan broke down. Something went wrong, and the writer felt the need to explain. Behavioral analysts call this decompensation, when control slips away and the person starts acting in ways that reveal more about their state of mind.
That line, "buried with nature now," is especially meaningful. It points toward an outdoor location, likely somewhere in the open desert. The language feels symbolic, like the writer is trying to reframe the tragedy in a way that feels less ugly to them. The admission that the death was unintentional supports the idea that this may have started as a kidnapping for ransom, but ended in tragedy due to Nancy's age and the stress of the situation. Former FBI agent John Iannarelli has said he has some doubts because the second letter does not give a clear location. That is understandable. Yet the secure server connection and the verified details from the first letter still give investigators confidence that these letters are authentic. This was someone who started with a plan, but lost control, and then reached out, perhaps to ease their own conscience or maintain power over the story. Now, let's talk about the family's response, which has touched so many hearts. On June 23rd, Savannah Guthrie appeared on The Today Show, her emotions raw and visible. With tears in her eyes, she asked the public for help. She said they were begging for information and that the family would never stop looking for their mother. You could hear the love and the pain in her voice. It reminded all of us how deep a mother's place is in her children's lives, no matter how old everyone is. After receiving the second letter, the family also posted a quiet message on Instagram. "We received your message and we understand." It was dignified and heartbreaking at the same time. In the 24 hours after the details came out, more than 4,000 tips came in to the hotlines. That shows how much people still care and how powerful the truth can be. The search has now moved with new focus toward Mexico. An anonymous tip in May led investigators to look near Mariosa, close to Nogales in Sonora, about 70 miles from Tucson.
Volunteer searchers with Buscando Corazones Nogales have been walking the difficult desert ground. They have found around 25 unmarked graves and at least 32 other bodies. Nancy has not been located yet, but that phrase, buried with nature now, feels painfully fitting for that wild, open desert landscape. When we put all of this together, the letters appear to be genuine. They contain enough real detail to be believable, yet they leave so many painful questions unanswered. There have been no arrests. Nancy has not been found. The case is still very much active. For many of us, especially those of us who are mothers, daughters, or simply older, this story hits close to home. It reminds us how precious our daily routines are and how important it is to look out for one another. Good lighting, cameras, neighbors who watch out for each other. These things matter more than we sometimes realize.
Here is a simple timeline to keep it all clear. Nancy was taken on February 1st. The first ransom letter arrived on February 2nd. The second letter came on February 6th with the devastating news. And now on June 25th, 145 days later, we are learning the full weight of what those letters said. And new tips are coming in once again. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me through this entire update. These stories are heavy, but they matter. If this video helped you understand what is happening or simply gave you a place to reflect, I would be truly grateful if you liked it and subscribed so we can continue following this together. Please feel free to share your kind, respectful thoughts in the comments. We are all hoping and praying that the Guthrie family finds the answers their hearts so desperately need. Notebook V, thank you so very much.